Today we have the unique opportunity to have with us Mr. Cheng Li, who is the director of John L. Thornton China Center at Brookings, in the Foreign Policy Program in Brookings. He's also a director of the National Committee on US-China Relations. Li focuses on the transformation of political leaders, generational change and technological development in China. So he's the prominent authority on Chinese politics. It's really an honor and a privilege to have him today with us. So what I propose is to give him 10 minutes for an opening statement, and then I'll ask 2 questions, and then hopefully we'll have the time for questions from the audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Koppa. I'm honored and very humble to speak to this wonderful audience. And also good to see Professor Yan Xitong, a really great thinker from China and a strategist from China. First, I want to applaud the host of the forum for devoting part of this session to China, the second largest economy and arguably the most ambitious economic powerhouse in today's world. Our subject, China's global integration, reflects a paradox of hope and fear. Hope, because China's tremendous financial power, the country's emphasis on infrastructure development, and actually quite remarkable, successful experience in this area, and its own huge market resulting from the rapid rise of the Chinese middle class, and also the country's growing awareness of environment protection, may contribute in a positive way to global economic growth. Fear, because China's rapid economic rise means a major change of geopolitical landscape. As any change in history, it will not be easy. Some of the Chinese global outreach are seen as exporting the so-called Chinese development model, although Chinese leaders hesitant to use that term. And this has been seen as it will undermine the existing international economic order. Now, as controversial as it is important to have a solid understanding of different perspectives. So in the following 9 minutes or so, I would like to address this subject from 3 key perspectives. First, the Chinese way, Chinese view of the existing liberal economic order. Actually, China does not want to challenge this order, as Chinese leader argues, because they benefit from that existing international order. China's rise is a result of this order. Some of my Chinese colleagues actually argue Donald Trump wants to challenge or undermine this international order, and far more than Chinese could or able to do. And also, China does want to have some change. China wants to sit the head table because China's growing economic influence and also various other development. Also, there's a few things we should keep that in mind. It is true that the Chinese intellectuals are increasingly cynical of the US-led financial order. The 2008 financial crisis was a turning point. China was very scared about that financial system. And also China becomes cynical, including some intellectuals, about the Western-style democracy, although this may not be widely shared by all intellectuals. I think it's still some of the intellectuals feel that way for the reason it happened in US and some of the other democratic countries. China certainly wants to take advantage of the relative decline of American soft power and also relative decline of American economic might. Now, under Xi Jinping, in the past 5 or 6 years, you do see China's foreign policy start to change from a low-profile, international policy advocated by Deng Xiaoping to what Xi Jinping called the proactive foreign policy, want to move to the center stage in global affairs. Now, the One Belt, One Road, you're going to hear the entire panel discussion reflects that change. Now, this is the first part, the US, the Chinese. Now, let's look at the United States. Actually, there are 3 new waves getting momentum in the past few months, 2 or 3 months. Quite disturbing. The first wave is about upcoming trade war with China. And this is on the economic front. Now, 2015, U.S. had about 500 billion US dollars trade deficit, of which China accounted for 334 billion, about 2/3. Now, you thought that after Donald Trump became president, things will change. But actually, last year, 2017, the trade deficit, U.S. vis-a-vis China, actually increased by 7%. That's explained. President Donald Trump was very frustrated. And you can see the recent effort. It's the beginning of the trade war. Both sides are testing the water. The real change probably will occur the 301 investigation and many others. And this is the first on the economic front. The second is on the security front. I think the administration really started to change the engagement policy with China, which started from Nixon in the 8 administrations. We always believe that engage China is our policy, but now start to change. You can see from the National Security Report, from the DOD report, from the State of the Union address, from recent comments by administration leaders, has been consistent, treated China as a strategic rivalry, or actually, I would say, enemy. Now, that's a fundamental change in U.S. foreign policy. Although probably some people in China argue, or in the U.S. argue, not necessarily reflect the entire establishment in the United States. Maybe more to do with American politics, domestic politics, or the budget concern, rather than the strategic thinking. The third wave, in my view, even more problematic, is what some American scholars call the sharp power. It's not hard power or soft power, but sharp power. The term just refers to China's growing authoritarian interference at the expense of Western values. So this occurs in the political, cultural, educational front. FBI director recently stated, in a really astonishing way, saying that we should be suspicious on any Chinese or even Chinese Americans in the United States in universities, and the professors, scholars, and the students. So this is something really against American values, but actually no media launched criticism about this ethnic, racial-based profile. So all these three fronts occur, so make the relationship is really in a crossroad. Now the third areas I want to talk about is about Xi Jinping's new era, and also Chinese domestic sources for foreign policies. Now, Xi Jinping's first term did have some achievements, anti-corruption, and they caught about 440 senior leaders, meaning vice ministers, vice governors, and the major generals or above. That's remarkable, never happened in PRC history. Secondly, the military reform was very successful. Basically, 3 objectives. First, change the Russian model, which emphasized on land force, to American model, emphasize joint operation with emphasis on Air Force and the Navy. Secondly, is to marginalize the so-called 4 greater departments that previously hijacked the military policy. So Xi Jinping put these 4 departments into 15, so he can directly control the different services, Navy, Air Force, Army, and the strategic forces, and also the operation theaters in Central, East, South, and etc. So really consolidate his power. The third point, he promoted young officers. So 90% of Chinese senior military officers in the Central Committee are new. This has never happened before in the PRC history. The Cultural Revolution, the Linbiao incident only involved about 30 to 40%, but Xi Jinping changed 90%. And thirdly, you can see his global outreach wanted to take a center stage, and whether it be Davos, the meeting last year, whether it be One Belt, One Road, BRICS meetings, and also the party meetings a few months ago. So reflect his ambition, right? Now, there's also China adopt some new economic policies you are yet to see. This is very, very important for some of the participants here. And China did have an economic slowdown related with structural change. The previous model, exports, investment heavy, with huge environmental costs, cheap labor, that model came to an end. Now Xi Jinping wanted to pursue three things. One is a new urbanization. Talk about smart city, talk about the urban clusters with a kind of new development, environmentally sound, including the major changes in Guangdong area, so-called Guangzhou, Shenzhen, and Hong Kong and Macau. That itself is very, very important. As we know, Guangdong, in terms of GDP alone, is about ranked 15 in the world, more so than Mexico. And also, he plans, you will see more announcements in the coming days or weeks, the so-called China's third special economic zone. This time will be in inland China, will be northern China. As we know, the previous one is in Shenzhen in the south, Shanghai's Pudong in the east, but this time it will be in the inland China. So this gigantic urbanization plan, which really will become an economic stimulus for China. Also, he will continue to carry out this, what Chinese called industrial policy, and Made in China 2025. So don't expect China will go to private sector development. So he will continue to promote state-owned enterprises. But at the same time, seemingly paradoxical, he will promote private sector, including to have a more favorable policy, because previously, 5 years or longer, foreign companies had difficulties in China. Now he is sending his economic advisor, Liu He, currently visiting the United States, promise that China will open for more companies in terms of the market access, intellectual property rights, and also some of the previous bias policies should be changed. Now, let's see whether we can deliver or not. But Xi Jinping is going to speak at the Boao Forum in April to lay out this opening policy towards foreign companies. Of course, you have a lot of cynicism, but let's see whether Xi Jinping can deliver. But also, there's another area. You know, the innovation, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, you probably hardly heard anything about China's innovation. But now China moved very aggressively in this area. China's e-commerce actually is already created a new business model. Now, finally, I think that you probably noticed the news. Xi Jinping just a few days ago announced he will abolish the term limits for the presidency. That received a lot of criticism, even within China. So people just think that he become like the emperor-like figure. I think his relationship with liberal intellectuals previously was not good, now completely in conflict. The liberal intellectuals, if you think it's important, I do believe it's important, will continue to fight against this kind of Mao-like mentality, or even the Cultural Revolution style personality cut. And also the political establishment. Not all leaders are yes men. Some of them think that Deng Xiaoping started about institutionalization or peaceful transition of power is so important for China. So Xi Jinping is meeting a very daunting challenge at home. He needs to justify why he will do that. But these things occurred at the time that China's foreign relation is in big trouble. So that added ammunition for those people who are criticizing China, that China wants to export China's own authoritarian model. So let me conclude. I think we are in a very critical moment. Unless both China and the United States adjust its policy, change its kind of blaming others or nationalistic sentiment, I think we are heading a new Cold War. As my colleague at the Council of Foreign Relations said, Cold War II. This is a war, in my view, should be avoided because no one can succeed. But in a very disturbing way, China is moving that direction. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It was really an exciting speech. My first question, the recent military reforms you spoke of raise question of whether China has the vocation of becoming a military superpower. So in fact, what is at stake is the relations between the US and China. So do you think that the United States can prevent China from establishing regional military hegemony in the Asian Pacific?
Well, first of all, I think the U.S. still has some real advantage in the military term, and both in terms of budget, in terms of weapons, in terms of many other areas. But China certainly is modernizing in a very fast pace. But from Chinese perspective, this is natural. China is a big country, will deal with its own territory tensions. You look at China's map, Korean Peninsula, Japan, East China Sea, then also South China Sea, with many countries, with disputes, then Indian border, then the northern part of China. So, and also the rise of China is also what Chinese believe that it's divided China because the so-called runaway Taiwan. So China is very firm on that. The recent the rhetoric in Washington, D.C. sounds like someone wants to change the one China policy, really push the red line for China. So that's become even more dangerous if you look at that atmosphere. So China thinks we are on defense, but the U.S. certainly perceive that China become very, very aggressive. And that's why we wanted to, based on the U.S.-Taiwan Act, want to protect the Taiwan. So we enter the vicious cycle, number one. So I think that that issue, the good thing is the mill-to-mill dialogue still going on. I think the DOD secretary probably will go to China very soon. I think in this area, this dialogue actually is more effective than the other dialogues, the mechanism. So I think this is the only hope. But otherwise, the arms race is already on the way, so that's extremely dangerous.
So my second question, we know that Xi has led an anti-corruption campaign, a huge anti-corruption campaign all over China. How does this campaign affect the Belt and Road Initiative?
Well, I mean, in my view, the anti-corruption campaign is definitely the right thing to do. Although people now increasingly argue that he did that for his personal power rather than for saving the Chinese Communist Party. Previously, some of the other leaders supported him because the corruption at that time, before Xi Jinping's power, is really quite remnant. I mean, we talk about $1 billion by some of the cases, US dollars, so you need to stop. And also, China will have the huge outflow of capital because China is going to go global. If you do not deal with corruption issues, you will see huge state loss. So that's the reason you need to have that. Then let China's, whether opening or whether go global become more reasonable. Otherwise, you can see corrupt officials will just become their personal gains. So that's the background. But on the other hand, you do see the recent regulations that China wanted to adjust the go global situation. So then you heard this case like Anbang, like a Hainan airline, and etc. It's still in the early stage of investigation.
So we can have one or two questions from the audience. Μία ή δύο ερωτήσεις από το κοινό. Please raise your hands. Professor Platias.
University of Piraeus. I completely agree with you that we have entered in a new Cold War. The question is whether this Cold War will turn out to a real war. And let me explain. Structurally, when you have a rising power and it challenges the dominant power, there is usually instability and, in many cases, war. This is called the Thucydides trap. Apparently, Chinese leadership knows about this trap and it has declared that it has a strategy to avoid it. But at the same time, looking how China is behaving in the South China Sea, doing projects like the Belt Road, that is essentially trying to unite the whole Eurasia under its economic and political control. It's like inviting conflict, not avoiding it.
Well, it's a very important question. Certainly, you are right that China need to more sensitive about the One Belt One Road. And your early comment, I think, is exactly what I worry. It's not just a Cold War; it's a real hot war. It could happen in today's world. Early on, I mentioned this war should definitely be avoided. Why? For several reasons. On the top is during the Cold War, it's two separate blocks. There's no economic integration because the Soviet Union at that time is not a significant partner. But now China's economy, U.S. economy, so intertwined together with the global economy. This is number one. Number two, I think it's premature for U.S., like some of the U.S. leaders, certainly, not like what the FBI director argued, that our engagement policy failed. I mean, look at the criticism from China after Xi Jinping announced he wanted to stay in power. This reflects the Western values, at least accepted by liberal intellectuals. I think also widely shared by some of the Chinese people. So it's far too early to say our engagement policy failed, because you have the middle class, you have the intellectuals pro-US, and also you have the Chinese leaders, their children, most of them actually study in the United States. So with all these things, I think leaders should be much smarter. And also there's another reason we face some other daunting challenges. China and the United States are very much in the same boat. Cyber insecurity, terrorist attack, nuclear proliferation. Look at what happened in North Korea. I mean, President Donald Trump said that, yeah, you need China, but how could you do that at the moment when your strategic, documents just target China as the enemy? So I think you do see the contradictions. So I'm equally critical of the U.S., the foreign policy establishment, not really correct these wrongs. So that's the danger that we face. We may take another question because we have a break, right? Yeah.
One more. Μία ακόμα ερώτηση, παρακαλώ. Η παρέμβαση.
Well, certainly, I personally think that China caused some tensions and problem in South China Sea. From Chinese perspective, they made the reason they moved that direction are twofold. First, they think that the U.S. support Japan in East China Sea, but certainly China, at this moment, they don't want to touch that issue. And because Chinese military is not ready for war, not only just with the United States, even with Japan, they don't think they can do. So they wanted to take advantage that the U.S. may not pay attention or not ready for confrontation in this area. But also, again, this is China's judgment. So they really expand and also have some new islands and etc. But this has a huge political cost. A lot of foreign countries become very nervous, and also China's neighboring countries are not so excited about the China's kind of rise. So under these circumstances, China now want to carry out the so-called One Belt One Road, actually with some decent or maybe even benign interest to help the infrastructure development. But how countries in this area react will make a huge difference. I think these countries, first, they want to have China's economic cooperation, but at the same time, very nervous China's military modernization. So this is the dilemma Chinese leaders need to address. I personally have serious reservation with China has been conducted in the past few years.
Thank you very much, Professor. We run out of time. Thank you all very much. Σας ευχαριστώ όλους πάρα πολύ. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.